Well, it looks like Chairman Grassley has counted the votes in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he says, okay, we're ready to vote. So I presume that he's got a majority in favor of Brett Kavanaugh's nomination. They're going to vote on Friday. They have to announce it 3 days in advance, and they've announced it. And then, of course, tomorrow they've got hearings with Kavanaugh and his accuser, and the Republicans have picked to do their questioning a experienced sex prosecutor, a lady who has done these cases many times, and they're going to say, all right, you take the lead in our program. But I guess the Democrats, each one will have 5 minutes to try to beat on Kavanaugh, and I'm sure he's been coached as to not to answer certain questions because they'll try to do everything they can to derail him. But assuming this goes forward, I presume now that they've got the votes to vote it positively out to the Senate, where the majority leader says we've got enough votes to get him confirmed. Wendy.
Yeah, as Pat just mentioned, Republicans are bringing in a female prosecutor to ask the questions in tomorrow's hearing. And as Abigail Robertson reports, some Republican senators believe the Democrats haven't played fair with the allegations against Kavanaugh.
It's a tense week in Washington as Judge Brett Kavanaugh prepares to defend himself against sexual misconduct allegations in a highly anticipated hearing on Thursday. Capitol Police arrested dozens protesting in Senate buildings, and angry demonstrators even harassed Senator Ted Cruz and his wife at a D.C. restaurant.
We believe survivors!
Protests picked up after an allegation emerged from Deborah Ramirez, who claims Kavanaugh exposed himself to her in college. Senator John Thune tells CBN News he questions her motives and wonders why she's only taking her claims to committee Democrats and leaving Republicans in the dark.
To me, these are clearly attempts, and frankly, attempts by the Democrats that I think they ought to, in many cases, be ashamed of, to try at the 11th hour to destroy the reputation of an individual based upon some, I would argue, pretty flimsy evidence.
While the White House indicated they're open to hearing from Ramirez on Thursday, as well as Dr. Christine Ford, Ramirez's lawyer told CNN she only wants to provide information to the Senate through an investigation from the FBI. Some senators question if Ramirez should appear before the committee.
I can't see at this point where there is any evidence to suggest that she ought to come before. I mean, she herself has said that she's trying to search her memory to remember exactly what happened.
Republicans hired experienced sex crimes prosecutor Rachel Mitchell to question Dr. Ford and Kavanaugh on Thursday. Senator John Cornyn says he hopes both are treated with respect during the hearing, and he's displeased with how the Democrats have handled the allegations.
Dr. Ford's allegations should have been brought forward earlier so they could be handled in a confidential and a respectful sort of way through the normal background investigation. That happens all the time. Unfortunately, we've seen that the norms and the rules by which nominations are considered have been pretty much been thrown out the window, and it's kind of scorched earth tactics.
Cornyn says he worries about the lasting effects this nomination will have on future judicial nominees.
I'm hopeful that that after this experience, people could see the benefit of returning to more civil, dignified way of considering the nominations. If we want to continue to recruit good people to hold these very important positions, it's important that we not expose their families to death threats.
Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer blasted Republicans for labeling the accusations as a smear campaign and again called for an FBI investigation.
If you want the truth, you ask for an FBI background investigation. If you're afraid of the truth, you avoid an FBI background investigation.
Republicans are eager to move the process along, and the full Senate could vote on Kavanaugh's nomination early next week. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
You know, if Chuck Schumer was so eager to have an FBI investigation, why did Senator Feinstein hold this information for months? They had it all given to them, and they could have referred to the FBI months and months ago, but they want to spring this last-minute surprise. It's clearly a negotiating tactic, and I think it's soured the American people against what they're doing. This kind of thing. But, ladies and gentlemen, I want to explain to you, and I said it before, and I say it again, this is a crucial vote. So please pray about it. If the Democrats are able to defeat a man with the distinguished record that Judge Kavanaugh has and bring up these spurious allegations at the very last minute and then say, well, he's got to release more information and he's got to get George Bush to say yes to confidential White House information when he was serving there and all this stuff. I mean, the FBI has done extensive background on this. They've done everything they're supposed to do. And then at the last minute to say, well, they ought to get the FBI to check on this one woman's allegations. It's something that happened 30 years ago when she was a teenager. I mean, this kind of thing is nonsense. And to smear a man with the reputation of Justice Kavanaugh, small wonder he says, I want to clear myself. I've never done any of these things. But now the Senate will have a chance to question him. But I do hope they don't make it a circus. And I might add, those people who tried to disrupt these hearings, they are violating federal law. And in my opinion, they should be prosecuted and put in jail. You cannot have people come into a distinguished body such as the Senate Judiciary Committee and begin to scream and yell and do everything they can to disrupt the proceedings. You just can't permit that in a civilized society. And we become a laughingstock to the world if we allow this thing to continue. So those people, in my opinion, should not only just be taken out of the committee room, they ought to be booked and prosecuted as criminals. Well, while Washington is consumed with the Kavanaugh case, President Trump is in New York, where he'll chair the United Nations Security Council today. Ephraim Graham has that.
Pat, President Trump's Security Council session comes after he addressed world leaders at the UN Tuesday. And while he talked about Iran, North Korea, and trade, the president also made clear his message is America first. CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy brings us that story.
In a 35-minute speech, the president covered a wide range of topics, specifically pointing out that sanctions will remain in place against North Korea until they get rid of their nuclear program. But the driving theme is how Trump will continue to put his country first. President Trump returned to the world stage, delivering his second address to the UN General Assembly. In it, he doubled down on the White House's policy of America first.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
Just last year, Trump stood here calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
Today, he changed his tune against the rogue regime following his historic summit with the North Korean dictator.
Since that meeting, we have already seen a number of encouraging measures that few could have imagined only a short time ago. The missiles and rockets are no longer flying in every direction. Nuclear testing has stopped.
Trump then took aim at Iran.
Iran's leaders sow chaos, death, and destruction.
The U.S. responded by withdrawing from the 2015 nuclear agreement and even reinstated economic sanctions. Trump's now asking nations to join him in isolating Iran.
We cannot allow a regime that chants death to America and that threatens Israel with annihilation to possess the means to deliver a nuclear warhead to any city on earth. Just can't do it.
The commander-in-chief reaffirmed support for Israel and his decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem.
The United States is committed to a future of peace and stability in the region, including peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Trump also announced new sanctions against Venezuela and that, yes, the U.S. will respond in Syria if Bashar al-Assad uses chemical weapons again. This was no doubt a closely watched speech as Trump says the U.S. is committed to making the UN more effective. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
Before the president's address, the UN Secretary General spoke about the promise and the dangers of new technologies. He said artificial intelligence, blockchain, and biotech could change or eliminate some jobs. And he said technology can also be a tool for terrorists and cyber criminals. Pat?
Well, I might add that while we're thinking about that, I want you to know that cyber terrorism is a very, very real threat. I've pointed out before in this program the danger to our electric grid from cyber attacks. It is very real, very possible, and the hackers that have been from North Korea and China and Russia are very real. And a number of businesses, including the J.P. Morgan Chase, have been hacked, and millions of accounts have been made available to these hackers. I might also say, if I can make a plug for Regent University, if you want to get your employees trained in cybersecurity, Regent University has a state-of-the-art cyber range and has a program that has been cited by the National Security Administration, the NSA, as a center for academic excellence in cybersecurity. So there are not only programs to, equip the C-suite, as it's called, but also just ordinary employees. So if you're interested in businessmen that are listening to this broadcast, you can call 1-800-910-7615. That's the number for Regent University Cybersecurity. Ephraim?
Pat, Russia has reportedly successfully tested another new weapon as Vladimir Putin continues to build up his military. Russia released this video of its new long-range missile, which can travel up to 155 miles. The video shows the missiles hitting 8 strikes on target ships. The missile can be fired from land or air, and it's built to destroy ships up to 5,000 tons. The missile can be fired from the surface or from Russian planes. Israel is celebrating the biblical feast of Sukkot when thousands of Christians from around the world come to Jerusalem, see prophecy fulfilled, and attend the Feast of Tabernacles celebration. Chris Mitchell brings us this look at the happy and prophetic event.
It's a gala event. Christian pilgrims dressed in national costumes celebrating the feast in Jerusalem.
More than 5,000 Christians from nearly 100 countries came here for the week-long celebration. They came to worship the God of Israel and stand with his people.
I know it's going to be a life-changing experience, and I love Israel, and I think that this is a time that things are going to turn around, and it's very prophetic.
We're showing up now as a statement of faith that day is coming when the Messiah will rule here.
David Parsons of the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem says this year's theme, Dare to Dream, comes from Psalm 126.
When the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like those that dream, and it's about the dream of Israel, all those centuries of being restored back to the land, ending the exile, coming back here, and we live in the day of Israel's restoration. Israel is now 70 years old as a reborn state, and there's much to celebrate. They've overcome many wars, terror attacks, rocket barrages, economic boycotts, other attempts to strangle it.
As part of this year's celebration, people are getting the CBN documentary, To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world. The film shows how Israel works to be among the first to respond to disasters and needs around the world.
And we're very happy that all the Feast pilgrims are going to go back with copies of it in English, and we're partnering with CBN to also provide Hebrew copies to all Israeli guests through the Feast this week.
And Christians are glad to be here.
It's great. It's a part of the prophetic words from the Bible.
We've just been studying the things in the Bible that talks about how Jerusalem is going to be restored and Israel is going to be restored, and we want to be part of that. It's amazing.
I am really delighted and thrilled to what I have been witnessed since yesterday evening. And I think I take with me a commitment to now pray more for Israel, for the peace of Israel, of Jerusalem, and even do more and mobilize more people to also work towards the peace of Israel.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
5,000 Christians from 100 nations. What a sight, Pat.
Well, I had the privilege of addressing that group some years ago, and it was a great thrill to me. But, ladies and gentlemen, let me go over with you real quickly what the Bible has to say. There were three major feasts listed in the Old Testament. One was the Feast of Passover. That celebrated the Israeli deliverance from Egypt, and it was fulfilled in the sacrifice of Jesus. The Bible says he's our sacrificial lamb. The second was the Feast of Pentecost, which is 50 days after Passover, Pente being 50. And this was the feast where the Holy Spirit came upon the church, and it was the Feast of First Fruits. And the early Christians, filled with the Spirit, were the first fruit unto the Lord. So that feast was fulfilled during Pentecost. Now, the third major feast was that of Tabernacles, which had to do with the final ingathering of the harvest of grain and so forth, and it was celebrated by moving, it was sort of a feast of transition where the people would move out of their houses and live in what were called tabernacles or booths. And I've been to Israel where it's interesting, you go out on the terrace of a restaurant, and they have thatch outside, and you're celebrating that feast. That feast has not ever had a New Testament fulfillment. And in my opinion, it speaks to the final coming of the Lord, the final ingathering, the final harvest of people unto the Lord. And so there's a great deal of emphasis on the Feast of Tabernacles among Christians, and that's why we make a big deal of it here at CBN when we have our Rosh Hashanah celebration. And I think it's something that you need to consider because two feasts have been fulfilled. The third is yet to be fulfilled, but everybody is feeling anticipation at that particular event, the Feast of Tabernacles or Booths. Okay?
It's an exciting time to be in Israel.
I was
there during the feast back in 1999, my first trip to Israel.
Yeah.
And we all marched through the streets with signs, and it was glorious.
Yeah, it really is. But I think the Christians are feeling it. They come to Israel, and I believe maybe the Israelis are feeling it. I don't know, but in my opinion, it's very important. But were we there together? We were there together on a couple of occasions.
Yeah, we were there together in 2006 during the war.
That was more fun.
Yeah, Pat was like, I want to hear the boom boom. We heard it. We heard the Katyusha rockets falling.
Boom, boom.
We heard it.